without further ado, Daniel, I would like to give the floor to you and to give you also the opportunity to share your presentation.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Very nice to meet you. My name is Daniel. I come from Spain and I'm working for the UNV, UN Volunteers Capacity Development Team, where I work as a learning analyst. And I work for the UN Volunteers headquarters, which is based in Bonn, but I'm currently connecting from Copenhagen in Denmark, where I currently live. So to take you through a presentation, I will ask you also, and Miguel, anyone, since we're a small group, to kindly access the link that I have just shared in the chat. And I'm going to do my presentation through Menti. So if you can kindly access the presentation, so we can, and can I actually share my screen? In that case, I will.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me go. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, in this safe wording context, a little bit about our experience with the UN volunteers. I will actually wait. Did you have any trouble accessing Menti? All of you are in? Yes? Okay. I don't see everyone's faces, but in any case, you can access the link, or if not, you can join at Menti, www.menti.com, and use the code that is in the screen, 67452075. All right, so I'm gonna talk for the next 20 minutes approximately, and this is what I'm gonna talk about. So I'm gonna try to explain a bit the importance of safeguarding from our point of view, try to face a bit the facts, also share a bit what is the UNV ecosystem concerning safeguarding, what UNV does for UN volunteers. They call it the duty of care, and the different learning opportunities on safeguarding that we do. I'm gonna challenge you a bit with some case scenarios to put some of your ideas into action. I'm gonna just highlight some key takeaways and then pros and cons about the trainings that we do on safeguarding. All right. A few disclaimers that I think are important, so we're all in the same page. First, that these opinions that I might have today, they are my personal opinions and not the ones of UNV. That's the first one. Of course, some of the topics here that I'm going to talk about is about misconduct, sexual misconduct. It may trigger some difficult and painful emotions for some people, so just saying this. This is not going to be a monologue from my side for the next 20 minutes, so I'm going to ask you some questions. And the scenarios and information that are coming in this presentation are the result of basically the last 4 years that I have been working with the UN volunteers. But in short, I'm a learning analyst, learning specialist, but I'm not a subject matter expert in the topic of safeguarding, just as a small disclaimer. And as I mentioned, I will focus on the context of the UN volunteers, safeguarding, and practical implications. So first of all, I would like to ask you a little bit if you are familiar with the topic of safeguarding in the European Solidarity course, in other areas. You know it 100%, you know it a bit, or you don't know it at all, about the frameworks, policies, reporting mechanism, how to provide supportive response, just to break the ice a little bit and see. There is someone that knows it 100%, which is good. So we have a little bit of everything. I think we are 10 people in the room, so I guess there are a couple of people missing. Great. Thank you for the answers. Let's see for the next question. Have you been provided with clear guidelines and responsibilities on how to respond, support a case of sexual misconduct involving an implementing partner at some point in your work, in your areas of expertise? Are there any clear guidelines and responsibilities? To some extent, not at all. Okay. Interesting. I guess this is why we're here today, to try to, as Miguel said, see what we can do. Great. Thank you, colleagues. Let's go to the next question. Have you heard cases where the lack of safeguarding has been critical to address a specific matter and your work in your duty station? Okay. More than once. All right. So it seems that there is a need to understand these matters. Thank you for your answers. I think there is one missing, but it's fine. Already 6 people out of 7 said more than once. So that already shows. All right, thank you. So after these icebreakers, what I'm gonna do a little bit is about the importance of safeguarding. Here, what I wanted to highlight, and this is the approach we have, is that there is a framework that we use in UN volunteers. There are some policies, and there is also a training framework. So we can focus on prevention by anticipating certain scenarios. Also, protection. UN volunteers, as I guess that European volunteers are a very vulnerable group. There are a lot of them in the field. There are a lot in the front line, and unfortunately, in the hierarchy of the UN, they are one of the lowest in the hierarchy. So they are exposed to situations where abuse of power, where situations of misconduct, situations where safeguarding is put at risk, and they are very vulnerable. And then we also focus on the response, and this is connected to safety and well-being. Why do we do this? Because it responds to an organizational commitment from the organization, from UN volunteers. And is it about from a collective accountability and responsibility that it starts from the volunteer itself to be informed about responsibilities and to be informed about rights, but it's also the accountability of the organization to provide those resources, frameworks, policies, training, etc. And as you know, probably you have heard, the UN is such a huge and big and complex ecosystem. So each organization has a different approach. Sometimes the efforts are duplicated, and the UN Volunteers Organization program is not an exception. If we go to the next one, I would like to highlight some facts about SEAH, which is sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, and sexual harassment, that they fall into safeguarding. And just to put on the table some facts, I guess all of you are aware of this, but just to highlight them, sexual misconduct is something real and can potentially occur anywhere. Can be in HQ, can be in regional office, can be in country offices, in peacekeeping operations, inside of working hours, outside of working hours. Sexual misconduct is a result of, as I mentioned before, context where power imbalance, gender dynamics, human crisis dynamics are in place. And as I mentioned, the category of UN volunteers are extremely vulnerable group due to their contract level, to that they are only there for 1 year, 2 years on average, and due to the fact that they are the lowest in the UN hierarchy. And if we add the layer that there are UN peacekeeping operations, where there are hundreds of UN volunteers deployed there, and there are environments where potentially there is more danger. They're in conditions of, emergency outside of the UN compound, war, like MONUSCO in DRC, MINUSCA in Central African Republic, South Sudan, Afghanistan, etc., etc. So I wanted to highlight also some data, and there are some interesting surveys out there that, even they're a little bit old, they reflect, unfortunately, the reality of the issue. And we can see that 39% is estimated percentage of UN workers that at some point have experienced sexual harassment at work. That's a huge percentage. And also I wanted to highlight that 66% from another survey of UN personnel will not take any action in response of a sexual harassment incident. And this could be for the reasons that I would have fear of not be taken seriously, or it would have a negative impact on my career. a lack of faith in the system, in the available mechanism. So this shows that there is actually a huge problematic. So what we need to do is acknowledge our responsibility as individuals, as part of an organization, and finish with this impunity. So the UN has this approach of zero tolerance on cases of sexual misconduct. So this is a little bit to do the summary about sexual misconduct. Then I know that there is a purpose to talk a little bit about policy framework or safeguarding. And about the UN volunteers, there is actually a quite robust policy framework. They are called the conditions of service. These conditions of service govern all since the recruitment, the salaries, leave, like medical insurance, etc., etc. And these are the guidelines. This is the framework, the policy that govern every single UN volunteer. Also, the ecosystem is a little bit complex because UN volunteers belong to UNV, but then they have a host entity. So a UN volunteer will have a contract of UN volunteer, but then they will belong to another UN entity like UNICEF, UNFPA, UNDP, etc. So there is a shared responsibility. There is a policy framework that belongs to UNV, but then when they serve to another organization, they have also to abide to the policies of that subsequent organization. So there is a primary responsibility that is what we call the UN host entity, and another residual responsibility in terms of safeguarding from UNV. I will go a little bit in depth with some examples about this, but what is important to understand here is that there is a policy framework that governs UNVs, and there is a policy framework from the host entities, and is a shared responsibility. UNV has something that is called duty of care for UN volunteers, and even if they have some residual responsibility in terms of, for example, prevention of sexual misconduct and safeguarding, UNV provides mechanisms, they provide training, they provide counseling, they provide guidance on different matters. But at the end of the day, if a UNV, for example, is serving with UNICEF or with UNDP, is this organization that one that has the main responsibility, and UNV has not, for example, any mechanism to report any incident. Everything is done via the UN host entity. What we do, and this is a major part of my job, is to take over in some periodical learning and training, which is mandatory and also on demand for all serving UN volunteers. If we go to the next slide. So what are the different learning available for UN volunteers? Every single UN volunteer, before their deployment, they have to do some mandatory training on safeguarding, on how to prevent abuse of authority and harassment in the workplace, and also how to prevent sexual exploitation and abuse. We also have and preach from a shared learning responsibility. First of all, the UN volunteer has a couple of mandatory courses, but the rest is on demand. The volunteer has to take ownership for his or her learning. That person is responsible to sign up for workshops, sign up for courses, and make a good use of the different learning resources. Then the host entity, for example, if a UN volunteer is serving with WHO, and that person needs to take a technical training on a certain medical tool or something like that, the technical training, the responsibility comes from the host entity and not UNV. What UNV is responsible for is for all the cross-cutting learning, soft skills, soft competences, etc., etc. So this is also important to remember. And there is, under the UNV learning portfolio, there are different learning experiences. We call it the volunteer learning journey. And depending on at which stage that UN volunteer is, at the beginning, during assignment, or at the end of the assignment, there are different learning solutions that adapt to the momentum where this UN volunteer is. So in the beginning, for the onboarding, there are some learning solutions. During assignments, there are different learning solutions to develop their skills, their knowledge, their awareness. And at the end of the UNV assignment, there are some learning solutions that are focused on, for example, career or coaching or applications, etc. The one that is connected to safeguarding this learning experience is like a learning path, is connected to prevention of sexual misconduct, anti-racism and anti-discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's called Empower for Change. So we want UN volunteers to become active agents of change, and they take ownership to promote and share and advocate for these UN values, no, that believes in diversity, equity, equality, etc., etc. If we go to the next slide now, enough talking from my side, I would like to challenge you a little bit. So what I'm going to do is to propose some scenarios where there is some safeguarding situations about misconduct, sexual misconduct, etc. And the only idea is that we can find some common red lines to see if we're all in the same page. And do not worry, because we're not here judging your responses. It's just to understand a bit what would you do in certain situations. All right. So first case, and then you will need to select which answers correspond more to what you think. So for example, a volunteer comes and tells you that she has been a victim of sexual abuse by a manager in the office compound. How would you react? And here, what would you do? Would you advise the victim to report? Would you check the victim's primary needs? Would you report as a witness? Would you ask further details to the victim? Would you just keep your case to yourself? Would you remind the victims about her rights? Would you advocate for periodical trainings for all the personnel? So you can choose what is the order. There are no good and bad answers, but maybe you feel identify with your current knowledge more with one or the other. Okay, thank you. First answers. Takes a bit, but no worries. I will give a few seconds. We have already 3 answers. Let's wait for a bit more. But basically, the answers are coming a little bit towards victim-centered approach, focus on the primary needs of the victim, advise the victim of what to do, remind the victim about the rights, maybe ask further details to the victim. That could be okay, but it's also sometimes a traumatic experience. Maybe the victim doesn't want to share anymore. But we more or less all agree that to keep the case for ourselves is not the right approach, and we need to act to finish with impunity. All right, thank you. Let's go with the second. So a volunteer tells you that he reported as a witness on a case of abuse of authority, and he is afraid of retaliation. And this is something very typical when the person that is abusing you professionally or is someone that is in a higher level. So again, some ideas of how would you react? Would you wait and do nothing until it falls into place? Would you check the witness' primary needs? Would you follow up personally with the duly authorized body? Would you make sure that the witness understands his rights? Would you advise that witness on the policies in place to be protected from retaliation? Or would you share the case with other close colleagues in the organization? So again, you can put in which order would you react. Sorry that I'm making you work, but I think it's important to engage a bit. All right, so again, we're more or less in the same page here nothing changed really. If it's a victim or a witness, we are focusing on what are the primary needs of the witness to inform that person about the available and existing rights or the policies in place, maybe even follow up personally so I can support that person. Maybe you will share the case with other close colleagues, but maybe that would also create more problems, and maybe the witness want to keep things confidential. But for sure, you will not wait and do nothing until things fall into place. So we also agree with that. Thank you. Let's go to another case. And this is also, unfortunately, typical as well. A volunteer tells you that she reported as a victim of case of sexual misconduct already 9 months ago. So she has reported formally. And after 9 months, she has no updates so far, and she has no faith in the system because she's seeking justice. So how will you react here? Would you follow up personally with the duly authorized body? Would you check the victim's primary needs? You will wait and do nothing until things fall into place. You will make sure that the victims know her rights. You will share the case with other close colleagues in the organization. Or would you reinforce the faith in the system in a way or another? All right, so again, thank you for the answers. Again, primary needs, awareness of the rights, how to reinforce the faith in the system. We will see with the key takeaways and why we're doing this. Maybe follow up personally, maybe share the case with other colleagues, and for sure not wait and do nothing until things fall into place. Thank you. And the last case, that's also another typical case. And a volunteer who is no longer serving has been confirmed as guilty of a case of misconduct in your duty station. So volunteers can be victims, witness, but they can also be sometimes perpetrators of misconduct, right? So what would you do here? A volunteer that is guilty after finishing his assignment. So would you follow up personally? Would you wait? Would you contact personally the alleged former volunteer? Would you share the case? Would you advocate for periodical trainings in the topic of prevention and response to misconduct? So people are aware of red lines, of consequences, of how to behave. Thank you for the answer. All right. So you will advocate for periodical trainings on prevention and response? Yes. Contact personally the alleged former volunteer. Maybe if it's your responsibility to do that. Maybe it's not because it's a different authority. You would maybe share the case with other close colleagues, but maybe that will create more scandal or not. That depends. And for sure, everyone agrees that wait and do nothing until things fall into place is not the best idea. So why all of these questions, all of these scenarios? And thank you for the answer. So first of all, these scenarios would have an impact in the organization where you're working at. So there is definitely a need to have a robust policy in place to be used as a reference. If you misbehave, there are consequences. If you are a victim, you have these rights. If you are a witness, you have these responsibilities. And this is the way that you can bring everything together. And of course, each organization has its own category of personnel, maybe different categories. So it should be common. For example, UN volunteers have different categories. In this case, the policy embraces all the different categories. As most of you have mentioned, there is a need to have trainings in awareness, prevention, and response, because this is the only way to make people aware of these things. I don't think that anyone that receives a policy framework will go deeply through the policy framework, really from A to Z. But if you have, periodical trainings where you have case scenarios, where you have different engaging approaches, people will understand better. And in this way, this will strengthen the capacity, knowledge, and ownership of each individual of response. As a result, you are able to offer a supportive response to victim and witnesses that can really make a difference when someone shares a case with you or you are actually involved in a case. You can use your position again as a trainer or as a colleague to remind victims and witnesses on the rights, reporting mechanisms to speak up. You will reinforce the faith in the system because your organization takes these things seriously. You have a policy framework in place, you are active and the support and not a passive one, just waiting to see if something is fixed. And of course, you are also investing in more satisfaction and well-being of the individuals involved in this policy because they know what to expect, they know what to do, and they know the red lines, no? So this is a little bit of why we have done this exercise. Then just to share with you what we have been doing at UNV, this is the learning program that I have been coordinating for the last 4 years. So we have delivered 121 virtual sessions as of today. We had more than 5,000 UN volunteers that have participated. I think currently now there are around 12,000 serving UN volunteers across the world. So it's almost half of them. Then we also have some kind of assessment of learning objectives, and we share a survey before attending the workshop and a survey after attending the workshop, and we can feel that there is a 25% of increase in the confidence of what to do after attending our workshops. And then we have done 35 partnerships with other peacekeeping missions, other UN host entities, field missions, and other UN stakeholders. So this is a little bit so you can see that we're actually doing something at UNV. Then the positive aspects about these trainings, besides the policy framework, is that if you do these trainings, everyone is familiar with the topic. When you talk about this, safeguarding is always a sensitive and delicate topic. So it's important to create safe spaces, even virtual, where people can actually start to talk about these sensitive issues. That's why we do not, for example, record any of the virtual sessions. Anyone can speak up, anyone can ask questions, anyone can answer. Then another thing that we have found that actually works is allyship, because not everyone attends the workshops, but as soon as one person has clear the rights and responsibilities, by the word of mouth, they can influence other colleagues, becomes allies in the workplace. And at the end, the only thing that we want at work is to have a dignified work environment where everyone can feel at ease. So allyship works. And finally, this is not about having a webinar with 500 people doing it once a year. It's periodical training. You give throughout a year different opportunities to volunteers to join and to talk about it. So we have cases of, there is one volunteer that I don't know why, he's participating in every single workshop of PSCH. Every time is a different group, every time the conversation goes to another direction. So for that person, it seems that it's something that in every session, that person is learning something. So periodical training works, not only check on the list once a year, a webinar with hundreds of people. Then we also have to assume the cons, no? What are the setbacks? So we have to understand what is success for safeguarding and training. Would you say that a high number of reported cases is something successful, or because you have less impunity and people don't have the fear to report? Or would you say that having a lower amount of cases shows that there are actually less cases? Maybe that means that people have fear to report. Maybe there is impunity. Maybe there is fear of retaliation. So we have to acknowledge and agree what is something successful for safeguarding. Then the cons of the training also is that these trainings are duplicated. Every organization has its own trainings. There are if we talk about UN volunteers, there are 12,000 UN volunteers out there. And it's very, very complex with each organization having its own policies, reporting mechanisms, etc. Then on the best case scenario that someone reports formally, as you know, justice is slow in all of our countries, and in the UN and for UN volunteers is not an exception. So it can take months or even years until a case has a resolution, no? So we have to bear in mind that, and that also means that many people lose faith in the system because of that reason. Then, as I mentioned before, there are many barriers to report misconduct in relation to safeguarding. It's fear of retaliation. You are afraid of report to someone that is higher than you in the hierarchy. You are afraid, for example, if you are coming with a fellowship or something like that, you don't want to create problems because you know that your career may be impacted. And of course, for victims or witnesses, this is definitely a traumatic experience. So it's not that easy just to speak up and say what happened to you. It's not as easy as it seems, no? So this unfortunately leads to impunity. And this is something that really is something that we need to work on. Also, there is a back and forth, as I said, because of this duplication. Some people pass the ball to other organizations, and at the end, there is a back and forth in this shared responsibility, and it's not that clear. And for volunteers, it's confusing where to address their claims or to who to contact, etc. And as I said, there is plenty of agencies, interagencies, and national agencies or country offices that potentially can develop these trainings, and that makes also the whole ecosystem a little bit confusing. So this is about the cons. I will finalize with one open-ended question. So maybe I have said too much information at the same time. Apologies for that, but I would like to know if anything of what I have said was relevant to you, and what elements have you found actually interesting or what I mentioned. You can just put one word or two words or whatever you want, just to understand if this has been useful. And I will wait a little bit. Okay, periodical training. Agree. Thank you. There were like 6 or 7 people reacting, so it will be great to have a few answers more. Being aware of power imbalances. Agree. Training possibilities. Yes, thank you. Training again. Overview. Give us a confirmation of the importance of the path we're taking here. Exactly. I hope somehow it is helping to start the conversation. Training possibilities and understand much better the imbalance. Thank you. And the importance to have written procedures. Exactly. So I hope that this short presentation was useful. The importance of checking on the victims and share with them their rights. Absolutely. We follow the victim-centered approach. So that's it from my side. I think that was my last slide. And yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know.